Good morning, everybody. Raise your hand if you are really tired of sitting in the same seat and listening to people come and talk at you 20 minutes after 30 minutes after 20 minutes. So we'll try to make this a little bit quick. I know we're heading into lunch. Everybody's got rumbly and the tumbly and ready to take bio breaks and all the rest. We're here to talk about B Corps. You can think about B Corps as business being used as a force for good. Before we do that, the main thread of this conference here at Richmond Unite is around disruption, market disruption. And I wish I had followed the great talk by Kelly earlier today around disruption, market disruption. I just want to ask for some audience participation just to get a little bit of energy back in the room after that fairly depressing video. Sorry. The mic isn't on, right? The mic, sorry, my bad. So a perfectly good video, big challenges with peak oil, but we're going to pick our heads up out of that and talk about like peak performance. What does it mean for businesses to be performing at a peak level for all their bottom lines around people, planet, and profits? So this is about disruption. So raise your hand or call out an answer to the following question. What's the most disruptive technology in the history of man? Wheel, that's good. What else? Electricity, another good one. There was a funny one back there I couldn't quite hear. Women, nice. Nice. Guns, those are pretty disruptive. Printing press, awesome. So nuclear power, those are all perfectly legitimate guesses. I'm not an academic or a historian, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. And I did read a couple of books recently by other economists who took a look at human history and said, and there's a clue on the board there. And so if anybody would like to spin the wheel and go for 50, what happened in 1712? Patents. Close, but no. There's no trademark and patent office in 1712. Close. The steam engine. The steam engine, really good. So the wheel was terrific because it could help us move things from A to B, but it was still under our own power. We're either lugging it, down the block, or we're getting a couple of horses tied up, and so we're still stuck to basically manual or animal labor. What we want to talk about today with B Corps is what I'll put out there as the single most disruptive technology since the steam engine. And it's the single most disruptive technology since the steam engine because just as the steam engine freed us from manual labor, the B Corporation is freeing us from the mindset that the only thing that business is good for is amassing personal wealth. And what we'll find out is that once we as individuals, as consumers, as entrepreneurs, as investors, as intrapreneurs in big companies, once we realize that our businesses can be used as a force for good in the world, we're able to bring our whole selves to work. We're able to put all of our assets and brains into our investments, and that unleashes us to manifest our full human potential. Because we don't realize our full human potential unless we're living a life of service to others, whether it's our family, our community, or future generations. And B Corps enable us to do that. One way to think of B Corps in the technology metaphor is it's the killer app for the 21st century. Using business as a force for good. What Kelly said before, I couldn't agree more. Innovation doesn't mean doing a myriad things and spinning a myriad plates, hoping that just a couple of them stay aloft. Find one great idea and get behind it and punch 3 feet through the brick. And the key insight of the entrepreneurs and investors that have gotten behind the B Corp movement is that they want to use business to do more than one thing. They recognize that every day they can walk and chew gum at the same time, and they want their businesses to be able to do that too. They recognize that they need to compete in the marketplace and need to make money. They also recognize that if they want to live a life of purpose, that their business also has to make a difference. What's the largest selling book, the greatest selling book of all time next to the Bible? Incorrect. Good guess, but incorrect. Similar thread. Sorry? After the Bible. Bible is number one, the good book, number one. War and Peace, not so much. So it's The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren, Saddleback Church. Well, we can't live purpose-driven lives if there isn't purpose-driven business in the world. We spend most of our waking hours at work. We spend most of our time thinking about things that we can buy and purchase as consumers. We fret about where our money is invested to provide for a secure retirement for ourselves or college education for our kids. If business can't have purpose as its soul, if its only purpose is to follow that line that Kelly showed us with Apple's bazillion ROIs and Steve Jobs took over, if that's the only measure of a business, we end up with more videos like the one we just saw. Right? Because we shouldn't just be rewarding businesses for competing to be the best in the world. We need to reward businesses that are competing to be the best for the world. And that's what B Corps do. So this killer app comes at a time at this incredible inflection point in human history. We are evolving this system, this economic system called capitalism, from one mode to another. And we are living at this incredibly exciting time in history where that's happening right before our eyes, with entrepreneurs like the folks from BioTaxi or Mark Lilly from Farm to Family, right here in Virginia, with entrepreneurs like Michael Perrone from Impact Makers and investors and entrepreneurs like Jim Epstein, all here in Virginia. It's entrepreneurs like that that are recognizing that we've come out of a 20th century version of capitalism, which is dominated by the interest of one particular stakeholder, called the shareholder, right, or the investors in the business. All of corporate activity has been driven and dominated by serving at the feet of that particular master. And the operating system of this old economy says that there's only one rule. It's an incredibly elegant, simple rule. So if you're a coder for, you're a coder of computer code, et cetera, or you're a physics professor, or you're a math major looking for the most elegant proof, right? Simple is good. And so simple is maximize shareholder value. Do that and do that alone, and that will keep everybody focused on accomplishing that one single objective. The problem with focusing on that one single objective is that it's to the exclusion of everything else. A few other things that seem to matter to us, like the health and safety of our workers, like what the environment looks like for our kids and our grandkids, like whether or not the workers are being paid well or have a chance to share in the riches that are being purchased, and a whole host of other things. We're at the transition from a shareholder capitalism to a stakeholder capitalism, one that moves from being where the balance scales are inordinately tipped in favor of just one stakeholder to one where there's more of a balance and equilibrium sought in balancing the interests of all stakeholders: workers, suppliers, community, the environment. And this is for entrepreneurs and investors that want to create businesses, want to invest in businesses, for consumers who want to purchase from businesses that are capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time, that are capable of creating shareholder value, because shareholders who have contributed capital have a right to expect a return for helping that business grow, but they also want to create social value. Why is our B Corps a powerful disruptive technology? Like the iPhone or the iPad or all other technology, computer-generated innovations, how you can recognize a disruptive technology is it makes the old technology obsolete. And it mostly makes the old technology obsolete not because of marketing campaigns, as great as Apple's marketing campaigns are. It makes it because it's a better product. It's a better idea, right? It's the proverbial better mousetrap. And so B Corps are a better mousetrap, right? They're a better mousetrap because who wouldn't want to support a business that's creating high-quality jobs and improving the quality of life in our communities while it's doing that? President Obama is here in Virginia today, undoubtedly to continue talking about, here in Richmond today, undoubtedly to talk about his jobs program. And jobs are job one right now. But what B Corp entrepreneurs and what B Corp investors would have you think is there should be an important adjective in front of the word job. It should be quality. Not all jobs are created equal. Some jobs pay better, some jobs have better benefits. Some jobs give you an opportunity to share in the ownership through profit sharing or an ESOP program or various other forms of employee ownership. Some are better work environments and flex time for return to work moms, et cetera, et cetera. Some help you advance through your career better. And some companies that are providing those high quality jobs at the same time are also doing a better job improving the quality of life in our communities, here in Richmond, across Virginia, and across the country. And they do that by making sure that as they produce the goods or services, that they do so with less waste, that they use more renewable energies to address that peak oil issue that we just heard about. They do that, and with the money they make, they are more philanthropic to all the nonprofit partners that we're trying to benefit here today at Richmond Unite. They give time off to their employees every year so they can go and volunteer for those organizations, because often those organizations need more than money. They need our sweat, and they need our intellectual capital to help them solve problems. And those companies at the same time are choosing to do business in a different way because they're consciously choosing suppliers that also create benefit. Whether they're local suppliers that help create local multiplier effects to keep that money circulating in a local economy, or whether those suppliers are women or minority-owned businesses that help make sure that whatever wealth is being created is distributed so we have a more diverse and healthy and robust civil society. So one question that someone might ask is, that all sounds great, and I'm sure that's interesting for a few small businesses, but how do they actually work? Are those businesses profitable? Are they really growing jobs? Well, here's the interesting thing. Running a good business that way is actually good business. So during the Great Recession, we're still in this long tail of this Great Recession brought on by a financial crisis that still lingers. During that Great Recession, as America shed 4 million jobs, more than half of the B-Corp community grew their job base by more than 5%. So not only are they creating jobs, but they're creating higher quality jobs, and not only are they producing goods and services at a profit, but as they do it, they're profiting their communities and taking care of future generations. Stepping back from all of that, why should we care about business? Again, we're here at Richmond Unite to figure out how we can harness the power of this community to support some incredible nonprofits that are working with youth throughout the greater Richmond area, doing incredibly important work where the market just won't go. Nonprofits like that are incredibly important to solving some of our most difficult problems, whether they be climate-related or community-related. Government, no matter what your political persuasion, has some role to play, at least in creating a policy environment in which we can solve our problems effectively. However, the nonprofit community and government are necessary, but completely insufficient to tackling our most challenging problems with the speed required and at the scale required. Whether you're liberal or conservative, whether you're Democratic or Republican, government is going to have fewer resources over the next 20 years than it did over the last 20 years. That's just where we're at. And so if government's going to have fewer resources, forget about the capacity to use those resources and political sort of drama and lack of political leadership on every side of the aisle. But nonprofits are running around with their begging bowl at the beginning of every year trying to figure out how to fill it so they can do the good work that they do. Just focusing on government and nonprofits is necessary but insufficient to the task. Part two of the insight that led us to create our nonprofit, B-Lab, that serves these B corporations, is that we have to harness the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. If we don't do that, we're effectively just spitting in the wind. Right? We're driving that car straight uphill, and it's just not going to go fast enough. We're not going to get where we need to go. The good news is that we have this incredible opportunity. The biggest trend of our lifetimes is this trend that some people call sustainable business, some people call social entrepreneurship, some people call it impact investing. It's all about finding market-based solutions to social problems. And the good news is there's a lot of people who are feeling the same way. There are over 60 million Americans who say, when I'm going out to make purchases, I care about not just the quality and price of the product, but the quality of the company that stands behind the product. Almost $3 trillion worth of investment capital. That's a lot of zeros. Almost $3 trillion worth of invested capital in the United States has an explicit purpose other than just maximizing return. This is what people call socially responsible investing. And for all of its limitations, and it has many, it's an expression of an intention to use our money for more than just making more money. The third thing is businesses. In addition to the businesses here in the Richmond area, there are 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 plus businesses in the United States that are members of sustainable business organizations, sustainable business associations that have said, we run our business with this attention to the triple bottom line. We care about financial profit, we care about treating our people right, and we care about being good stewards of the environment. That's the opportunity. The problem is that our economic system, this form of capitalism, this form of shareholder capitalism, was not created to grow this new emerging sector of the economy for three major reasons. The first is corporate law does not support looking at things through more than one lens at a time. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Corporate law, like we saw before, has one rule, right? The operating system is super simple. Maximize your returns to your shareholders. That's your job. If you do anything else, you run the risk of being sued. That has an incredible chilling effect in boardrooms and executive C-suites in every company that's got outside capital, helping them grow. Second thing, is there no standards? Every company, if I had $1 for every company that's running an ad campaign showing you like cupped hands of gnarled farmer hands that have pulled some weeds or planted a beautiful seed or roasted some great coffee, fair trade organic coffee, or a bucolic blue sky and green hillside with these big gorgeous cows selling me organic milk or whatever it is, or with wind farms on the top. If we had ads for if we could just stack up the dollars for all those ads, we'd all have a lot of money. There are no standards to help us as investors or us as consumers tell the difference between somebody that's actually running a good company from somebody that's just running a good ad campaign. We have standards for individual things like organic food or fair trade coffee or Energy Star appliance or a LEED certified building. But just because you're standing in a LEED certified building doesn't mean that effluents aren't being pumped out the back or that people are getting a fair wage or good benefits inside. Right? It just tells you that they built a building according to certain green specs. We don't have an aperture on our lens wide enough to look at the whole company. We're all whole people. We should have a lens that we can look at the whole company so we can make decisions about which kinds of companies we want to support. The third thing is a lack of a capital market. There aren't effective capital markets, investors. There isn't pooled capital to support these kinds of entrepreneurs. It's hard enough to raise capital as any kind of entrepreneur, doubly hard if you're an entrepreneur who's thinking about, again, these multiple bottom lines, because you're not speaking the same language as the traditional capital markets. To give you an idea about corporate law, just last year, the Delaware Chancery Court, which is the main seat of corporate law in the United States, ruled in a very famous case between Craigslist and eBay, saying that directors of a corporation, those are the people that basically govern the corporation, the board of directors, cannot pursue a business strategy that openly flaunts shareholder wealth maximization as their goal. To do that would be against Delaware corporate law. Delaware is where most corporations in the United States are incorporated, and certainly almost all corporations that are seeking outside capital. So corporate law works against wanting to do anything other than get that stock price up as fast as it can. And if we care about more than that, corporate law is working against our needs. So we need a new operating system for business, because we can't change outcomes unless we change the rules of the game. That's fairly simple. So how do we change the rules of the game? And how do we do so in a way that recognizes that free markets work? They're incredibly powerful and useful and effective. So the way to do that is not through more regulation. It's not through telling people what they have to do. It's just through giving people more choice. To say, if you choose to run a business that's looking at multiple bottom lines, here's a new corporate form that reflects your intentions. If you don't want to do that, if you want to just create a business whose sole purpose is to maximize your returns, well then create a traditional C Corp. Or an LLC, no problem, have at it. There's a huge functioning marketplace of that. But if you have this other spirit in you, this disruptive spirit that seeks a new economy that's more sustainable, more inclusive, let's create a legal form that's useful for you. That's changing the rules of the game. It's changing the DNA of the business. That DNA is embodied in a new corporation. There are C Corps, there are S Corps, now there are B Corps. B, because they're racing to be the best for the world. B, because they create benefits for all of their stakeholders. B, because they're trying to be the change that we seek in the world. And so very simply, what's a B Corp? Think of it as a certified sustainable business. They meet higher standards, rigorous standards of social and environmental performance. They go through a battery of questions around their employee practices, their supplier relationships, their community engagement, their environmental practices. And if they get a minimum score on that set of audited standards, then they're eligible to use the B Corp logo to communicate to their investors or employees or suppliers or consumers, we're a different kind of company that you might think is worthy of your support. In addition, they have higher standards of accountability, which I'll explain in a second, and higher standards of transparency. So if you're a certified B Corp, you have to publish your annual B report, your impact report, which shows how you're treating the consumers, your employees, your other workers, your suppliers, your community, the environment. And not everybody does everything great, and so you as the public, we as the public, get to see, and then we get to choose which companies we want to support or not. The other thing that B Corps do is they amplify the voice of this very disparate set of social entrepreneurs, from sustainable ag to clean manufacturing to microfinance, et cetera. They aggregate all those into one clearly defined marketplace that shows those are good companies. Those are the people I want to support through the use of the unifying B Corp brand. Think of it as a good housekeeping seal for a better way to do business. So I want to come back to the legal standards, or right back to the operating system. It's super simple. Right? We don't have to go to law school or call up our corporate attorneys to figure out what this means. It's super simple. All it means is that if you're a B Corp, you've amended your articles of incorporation, your governing documents, your your bylaws, to say basically this. This is paraphrased. The lawyers would have it be many, many more words. But this is basically what it is. We as a B Corporation, and I as a director of this corporation, now have a legal duty, what's called a fiduciary duty, to consider the impact of our decisions, not only on our shareholders, but also on all of our stakeholders, which includes shareholders, of course, but it also includes your workers, the community environment. That's not such a high standard, but it's a quantum shift in what the purpose of the business is and what the relationship is between business and society. The second piece are those performance standards. This is just to give you a quick visual. You think of it as a nutrition label on the left. That's that B report I was talking about that shows you what your score is either overall, what the score of that B Corp is overall, or on each of those different areas of the business. The piece on the right is like one section of the impact assessment that's looking at energy usage. Maybe there's a dozen or 10 questions on energy usage. There'll be other questions on compensation, benefits, work environment, other on charitable giving, volunteerism, suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. And companies can do any of those things that they want. There's no prescribed checklist of what you have to do. But as long as the sum total of all those activities earn you enough points to reach an 80 out of 200 available points, then you're eligible for certification as a B Corp. Now some might say 80 out of 200 sounds like 40%. My kid's in 7th grade. That would be a failing grade. The flip side is, as a baseball player, I know Andy spoke earlier about being a huge Yankees fan. I'm a Phillies fan, so we'll talk later. But if you're batting 400, you're basically in the Hall of Fame, right? Which is basically 40%. Running a business with an idea towards both making profit and having purpose, making money and making a difference, is as hard as hitting a 98-mile-an-hour slider. So why do standards matter? Because we need to tell the difference between a good company and good marketing. They matter for all of us in all of our different roles. They matter whether we're consumers that are looking for a brand for good business. They matter for us as investors. Investors don't call it a brand, they would call it a rating. Right, like S&P ratings or Moody's ratings or Fitch ratings. They're looking for ratings for high impact investments. Companies want to create sustainable supply chains. Policymakers might want to create incentives for these kinds of businesses. As a policymaker, why wouldn't you want to encourage there to be the formation or the growth of more businesses that were creating higher quality jobs in your jurisdiction? Or businesses that were being more responsible to improve the quality of life in your community? This isn't an abstract idea. There's over 450 certified B Corps all across the country in over 60 industries, from small sole proprietors to multi-thousand employer industrial manufacturers. B Corp banks, accounting firms, law firms, footwear companies, technology businesses, venture firms, et cetera. Two of them really quickly. 30% of the American workforce are independent workers, freelancers. There's an amazing company out of New York City called Freelancers Insurance Company. They insure 100,000 freelance workers in New York State to give them access to high quality, low cost health insurance that they didn't have otherwise. That's a social enterprise. That's a for-profit social enterprise. They're making money. They're incredibly profitable. But their business model is not to figure out how to maximize their profits. It's how to maximize their impact while making a profit enough for them to grow. Another company, Cascade Engineering out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. These guys are doing sustainable manufacturing at scale. They're an industrial plastics manufacturer. If you like your Aeron chairs from Herman Miller at your offices, these are the guys that do some of the plastic injected molding for those companies. This isn't like your organic farm. This isn't your organic CSA. This is difficult industrial stuff. And they're doing it with not only a high degree of environmental sustainability, but they also have a world-class welfare to work, welfare to career program where they're taking people from difficult to employ communities, like up in Michigan, where our previous speaker was talking about, and giving them an opportunity not just for a job, but for a career. This community of entrepreneurs, these 450 companies, are not only saying it's good enough for me to do this for myself, but they want to make it easier for the next generation of entrepreneurs to follow in their steps. So the certification has become legislation. Taking those 450 one-off legal innovations and turning them into a legally recognized new corporate form. Corporate law in the US is a state-by-state deal, which means you have to innovate and you have to do this in each of the 50 states. So 5 states, and proudly, including Virginia, is among the first 5 states in the country to legally recognize B Corps as a distinct corporate entity, which means that when you talk to your accountant or your attorney about what kind of business you want to start, now you have another option here in Virginia that you didn't have a year ago. You guys are leading. There are 5 states done. There are 45 to go. As we speak today, B Corp legislation is on the desks of the governor of New York and the governor of California, which when those 2 things happen, it's also moving through Michigan and Pennsylvania and North Carolina. As those states go through, 30% of the US economy, 30% of our entrepreneurs and investors will now have a choice to invest in a better way to do business. That's returning a profit for their shareholders and also value for their employees. The last thing I'm going to mention is that these companies are also creating a capital marketplace for this. So as investors, we can invest with a higher purpose than just return on investment and just getting that number to go up on our investment. We also want our impact to go up. But we can't invest for impact unless we measure impact. And so using that same rating system that we use to certify B corporations, large institutional investors like JP Morgan and UBS are working with B Lab, our nonprofit, to create a rating system that's more investor-facing that will help them rate for impact their global private equity portfolios. So they can report not only that they're a top quartile financial return investment opportunity, but they're a top quartile impact investment opportunity. And so then we all have just more choice. We can choose to invest in companies that are delivering both social and financial return. So we're here at this incredibly historic opportunity to create a better world through business. We didn't invent this idea. Lots of people are talking about it from all persuasions. Folks like Bill Gates, a fairly card-carrying capitalist, talking at Davos about creative capitalism. Muhammad Yunus, a recent winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for his pioneering work in microfinance, talks about social business. Thomas Friedman, the New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, talks about a sustainable economy. We didn't need them to tell us this. We have constant reminders, whether it's a financial crisis, environmental disasters like the BP oil spill, or the constant reminder of 3 billion people living on less than $2 a day and the threat of climate change and peak oil. We can seize this opportunity to create a better way to do business by building a new sector of the economy that's purpose-driven to create greater economic opportunity, restore the environment, strengthen community, and alleviate poverty. In a bit of hyperbole, Esquire magazine talked about the B Corp movement and said this might turn out to be one of the most important ideas in the country. That it might turn out to be like civil rights for blacks or voting rights for women. Eccentric, unpopular ideas that took hold and changed the world. It only changes the world because people are receptive to it. It's nothing that's being force-fed. A disruptive technology, in this case, is about a disruptive economy that ushers out an old economy and replaces it with a better alternative that enables us to support companies that make money and make a difference, that create high-quality jobs, that improve quality of life in our communities across the country, and that reconcile the invisible hand with the golden rule, which is we should want our businesses to behave as we do, which is to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And so with that, I'll turn it over. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.